Well, when you're trying to explain why that thing keeps going up, okay, why that number keeps going up, okay, you have to sort of revert back to, you sort of have to revert back to economics, right? Supply and demand. Prices increase when supply is low and demand is high. Okay. Well, you could make that argument here, and many have, but we actually have a really high vacancy rate here. Right? There's lots of people, or lots of rental units that are completely open. Since 2010, that rate was around 4%. We had a 4% vacancy rate. 4% of all rental units were unoccupied. Every year since then, it has gotten larger. Okay? The latest data that I'm aware of in 2015 puts us at around 10%. 10% of all rental units are unoccupied. So the argument that this, supply and demand, we just need to, there isn't enough here, just doesn't really ring true. Okay? Then, of course, you can sort of bring into a couple other forces in here, right? We have a very transient population, people coming and going. Competition for these units is really high, okay? Especially units that are closer to campus, right? Closer to services and things that people actually need, whether you're a student, whether you work at Fort Riley, okay? And it's that transient population, right? That high competition is really keeping prices high. And quality, I might argue, not so good. So location and also lack of transportation. Okay, there are some, I'll talk about transportation again in just a second. But of course, that's only half of the equation. Right? Cost burden is how much money you make and how much money things cost. How much money do people make? Let me tell you. A minimum wage worker needs to work 2.5 jobs, which is around 100 hours a week, to afford a fair market rent in Manhattan, if it's going to be 30% of their income. Okay? Again, affordable. 2.5 jobs. A living wage would be $11.39 an hour for an individual to support themselves in Manhattan, Kansas. It would be $27.15 an hour for one adult with 2 children. The minimum wage in Kansas right now, correct me if I'm wrong, is $7.25. Is that right? Okay. Residents working year-round full-time jobs make less than the state average. Okay? That is not including students. I mean, there may be students here who work full-time year-round jobs, but my hunch is that it's not many. Okay? So that figure, the fact that people working full-time year-round jobs make less than the state average should be an indication of how much we're getting paid. You also have to think about supply of what? Right? There are different, not all housing is created equal. Right? People have different needs, different sizes, different shapes, different locations, okay? And also different costs, different price tags. We actually have this really great mechanism, in my personal opinion, in the United States, where we can provide subsidies for housing. Okay? We have a whole department in the federal government, the thank you. Okay. HUD provides subsidies to communities all across the country and through various mechanisms to make it easier for people who are lower incomes to afford housing. Okay? So our market rate housing is not that. Market rate housing is what mostly you see out in the community right now. Okay? There's probably only about just a little over 1,000, maybe 1,500 subsidized units in the community. Everything else is not subsidized, and we call that market rate. So my sense is that market rate is doing pretty well. Okay? We got plenty of that. We got 10% vacancy rate. What we're probably not doing so well at is with the supply of income-based housing. Okay. So let me just give you a snapshot of what's going on with our income-based housing. Okay? In other words, subsidized housing. For the past 30 years maybe, and some of the folks in government may have a better idea than I about this, the funding of those programs is just going down. Okay? Those are being cut, and I think there's really good reason to believe that it's not going to get any better. Okay? But what about the sort of demand here? Do we have enough here? That might not be a problem if we have enough here. Okay? If we have enough subsidized housing. Well, in Riley County, we have the Manhattan Housing Authority. This is the local agent for those programs. Last year, they served 1,219 clients. There's depending on what kind of unit you want to get into, there's between a 9 and 18-month waiting list. Of the people that they serve, 74% have a female as the head of household, 31% of those with children. 93% have wages or other as sources of income. In other words, not welfare. In fact, 0% listed welfare as their major source of income, and 0% received unemployment benefits. If you talk to Joanne Sutton at the Housing Authority, she will be the first one to tell you that the people that she serves work. They are the working poor. What about the Manhattan Emergency Shelter? Last year they served 500 homeless individuals, including 115 children. They're busting at the seams. They don't have anywhere to put their clients anymore, and they're scrounging for money to expand. Shepherd's Crossing is a coalition of 37-ish churches in the area who serve low-income families to help them afford housing, utilities, and these kinds of things. Last year, they served 1,100 families. 56% of those families have children. 46% are employed. 80% are below the poverty level. They gave out $286,000 in 2016 to these families who qualified. And the demand for those services is increasing. It's been increasing almost every year. If you talk to Beverly Olson, she'll tell you the same thing. So, the figure that you're looking at in the middle on the right is simply to demonstrate what I've already told you, that the supply of income-based housing at the national level is decreasing. And this is actually for Riley County, Kansas. It reflects what's going on at the national level. So, I'm hoping that I've sort of made the point here that income-based housing is a problem and that wages are a problem. If I've done that, that will sort of lead us to, well, what do we do about it? Okay, and I think there's a few options here in my mind. One is you could do nothing. Okay? The trends would suggest that that's a bad idea. I don't think you want to do that. Before we get into some of these potential solutions, I really want to encourage you, and I think we have to, I'm really sort of slapped in the face by this ethical question of whether or not it's okay that we let people who make less than $20,000 experience this cost burden at about a 20 times higher rate than everybody else, especially if they're working. So what can we do? Well, one thing you'll hear is, well, let's build more market rate housing. Okay, build, build, build. That's how the story goes. Okay. Now, the theory behind that is that if we build market rate housing, which by the way, nobody who's poor can afford, if we build market rate housing, what will eventually happen is that all of that market rate housing, sometimes that's luxury, apartments and houses, if we just keep building there, eventually what will happen down is that it'll do this thing called filtering. It's what people call filtering, right? People move, you got people moving up, starter home, next home, moving up the ladder, and then for the people at the bottom, they kind of get whatever trickles down. See what I did there? Okay, so that's one possible solution. Okay, I say that sort of jokingly. I don't know that that's not a good thing to do. Every community is different, and again, I'm not the authority on this. You could build more income-based housing. There's a lot of different ways to do that. You could build accessory dwelling units. Okay. If you got space in your backyard, you could throw up a granny flat or a tiny house. And if we're going to get serious about the issue, then you really have to do something about living wages. Okay. So what are things that I think you can do right now? Well, the first thing that you should do is you should scrutinize all new developments and expenditures that happen at the city and county level and ask yourself the question, how do they benefit low-income residents? Okay. Number two, we should reactivate the Manhattan Living Wage Coalition or form a similar group. Okay. I don't have a lot of experience or knowledge about this group, but this was recommended to me by a trusted person in the community. Number three, if you just want to continue to be part of this conversation, join the Making Change Affordable Housing Group, and you can email me to do that. We meet about once every 3 or 4 weeks to talk about this issue. And number four, you can follow the Healthy Communities Lab link, which is my lab at K-State, where we have been working on this issue, creating podcasts and blog posts and other reports to inform the community about what's going on. So, I think we're going to pause here and then come back for questions afterwards. Okay, cool.